Hola a todos, bienvenidos nuevamente a Viajes de Fe. Y en esta semana tenemos una entrevista muy especial con una persona que tiene una historia interesante y más con el contenido que ha creado que se puede encontrar en YouTube. Su nombre es el hermano Jeff Roundy. Él tiene un canal en YouTube que se llama Latter-day Saints Q&A o Preguntas y Respuestas Santos de los Últimos Días. Y su canal tiene una dinámica interesante, un poco diferente a la que se suele ver en YouTube, tanto a favor como en contra. Entonces él ha aceptado poder tener una pequeña entrevista y nos va a contar un poco en cuanto a los temas que él cubría en este canal, y ahorita veremos por qué él cubría, y también cuáles son sus sentimientos en cuanto a las cosas a favor y en contra de la iglesia. Nuevamente, esta entrevista va a estar en inglés, pero vamos a agregar subtítulos para que puedan seguirnos en casa. Así que comencemos y démosle la bienvenida al hermano Roundy. Welcome, brother Roundy. Thank you for being on the channel today.
Now I can understand you.
Thank you for taking the time for this little interview. And just so our viewers and our listeners can get to know you, could you tell us a little bit more about your YouTube channel?
Sure. And by the way, it's kind of a fun day for me to be on this because I just took my daughter. My wife and I dropped our youngest daughter off at the MTC just a few hours ago, and she's going to Ecuador, Guayaquil North mission. So pretty exciting. So she's studying Spanish as we speak in the MTC. But yeah, my YouTube channel is called Latter Day Saints Q&A, and it's basically it's not like well, we'll probably get into this, but uh, it's a library of content, with essentially about 80 videos total in there, 40 answering critics questions or challenges, criticisms of the faith, if you will, and 40 evidences. But as far as the question you wanted me to answer was, what got me started, right, on this, like in the beginning. So um, it was really a very strong feeling from the Spirit to do it. And it came about through, um, I attended a conference of Defenders of the Faith. It's called FAIR. About a month before I had attended this, I think it was in 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. I had been praying, and I felt this impression. The scripture came to my mind: "Lift up the hands that hang down, strengthen the feeble knees." That scripture from Isaiah. And anyway, I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that, but I knew I was supposed to be doing something that maybe I wasn't doing in this area of helping strengthen faith. So a month later, I'm sitting at this conference, and they actually had a general authority there. First time they've had a general authority there, and it was Elder Pearson from the 70. And he shared an invitation, a challenge, in a sense, for people to help. And I have this quote from him on my trailer video. I'll share this quote. He says, this is one of the things that really I resonated with. He says, "It is essential that members create and promote online content that effectively communicates what the church believes in clear, authentic, and engaging ways, especially on some of the most prevalent search topics. Access to understandable answers to critical questions and concerns can help correct misunderstandings about the church and remove stumbling blocks to faith. It can also level the playing field for the sincere truth seeker to find and recognize truth in a world increasingly hostile to faith." And what he was saying was that there was an avalanche of negative criticisms focused on the church on, like, YouTube. He gave as an example, is heavily skewed to the negative. Just not a lot of positive content out there defending some of these things. And so he was basically saying, let's go on offense out here and be defending the faith to even it out better there. And he also challenged the members that it would be maybe seen in a different light than the church producing it, in the sense of people maybe viewing it as a more authentic type of thing. It won't be as polished and professional necessarily, but people may resonate with it in different ways than the institutional church there. And then what led to the evidences part. So what ended up happening is I just had this impression when he was speaking that I was supposed to do something. My wife had the exact same thing happen. It was just literally right after this talk, we were eating lunch together, and we both started talking about it, and we just knew that I was supposed to do something, and decided to do it on YouTube because he talked about YouTube being one of the key places, and I was scared to death, to do something like this. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but the part where the evidences series came in is I thought about the the aspect of just defending criticisms, and it was kind of a discouraging thought, quite frankly. I knew that it needed to be done, and it was something I was going to do, and it was really the prompting I had. But I thought, I just love the church. I love the gospel. I love the Savior. There's so many things that I just am passionate about in the church and our doctrine and things. And I thought, I want to also really be on offense where I'm talking about, these beautiful aspects of the restoration. And so I thought, well, I'll call those evidences, evidences, of the restoration um, being true, etc. And so it was overwhelming in some ways because it doubled up my work, literally. And instead of 40 videos, I ended up with 80 videos. But let me share you this quote from Elder Holland that came to my mind. I have this on my trailer video too. And this is also what kind of sparked that evidences aspect. So Elder Holland shared this at BYU in 2017 at the 50-year anniversary of the discovery of chiasmus in the Book of Mormon by Jack Welch. So he said, my testimony to you tonight is that the gospel is infallibly true and that a variety of infallible proofs supporting that assertion will continue to come until Jesus descends as the ultimate infallible truth of all. Our testimonies aren't dependent on evidence. We still need that spiritual confirmation in the heart, but not to seek for and not to acknowledge intellectual, documentable support for our belief when it is available is to needlessly limit an otherwise incomparably strong theological position. We ought to be more assertive than we sometimes are in defending our testimony of truth. So that was my rally cry. That's what I thought. Okay, this is great. I'm going to just do this. So it was really fun, just to think of. So when I put this, and this was one of the other questions about just this library concept, is I thought, okay, the way that I want to do this is I don't want to necessarily have this unending YouTube channel where I'm just always producing content. There's lots of great, that's the typical YouTube channel. But what I wanted to do was basically build a library of content that was fairly definable up front. And so I just went through and thought, okay, what are all of the issues that people have stumbling blocks on there in faith? And so I just went through and labeled it all out. Like, these are all the topics there. And then the evidence side was kind of an interesting process because I'm like, well, okay, this is going to be kind of fun. Just think of, just kind of brainstorm. So sometimes I had to come up with creative thoughts or ideas or ways. Okay, here's a topic I'll do, type of a thing. And so that was a less well-defined list necessarily. In the beginning, the criticisms were pretty well known, and I knew what to do on that. Sometimes people will say, "Hey, where did you go? Why haven't you been putting out new stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, that was never really the intent. It was to build this library, like a big book that you'd have on the shelf, but it's a video book, and you can take it off on these topics here and have them all addressed in video form. But it was kind of a set library project, and once it was done, it was done. Now I still stay actively involved. Literally every day I'm answering comments, People will send emails through the website, which I host the transcripts of all the videos. So then I'll go on and interact with people on a daily basis. So it's amazing how involved I still am through that. But I left the door open if there's issues or things that come up that I feel like, okay, this isn't something I've already addressed in some way or fashion, then maybe should put something out. Church finances came up recently heavily in the news, and I went back and watched that video I did. I thought, holy cow, I thought I just kind of really did a very good job on addressing, even though maybe some numbers and things could be refreshed on, some of the data, but the topics that I covered were still incredibly relevant to all of the breaking news, so to speak, or the updated news on the topic. So, but yeah, so I might make some stuff in the future if things come up. But yeah, so that's the scoop on why it was considered kind of a library.
Oh, that's great, Brother Roundy. And when you're mentioning about evidence as something that caught my eye when I watched your channel for the first time, it was that you answered the critics, but as you mentioned, you also showed evidences. And I began to understand little by little that the term for people who defend the faith was apologists. And since English is not my first language, the first thing that came to mind is apology. So I always imagine and apology has been more like, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for that. And
Yeah.
so I really like how you help me understand better the concept of, as you mentioned in Elder Holland's quote, that it's not just defending, but also saying things in the offense instead of just the defense. And the content in that channel and well, I'll say this part in Spanish. Para aquellos que gusten ver este canal, está subtitulado en español, entonces pueden ver los subtítulos. Y de igual forma, como comentaba el hermano Randy, también tiene un sitio web en el cual pueden ver en los guiones para sus videos y también eso se pueden traducir sin ningún problema. Entonces, con este material hay muchas cosas que requieren mucha investigación. And Brother Roundy, switching back to English. Um, in your videos, there's a lot of research. It feels rich with information. And when did you research all of that? Was that something that you did along your lifetime, or is it something that you chose to do when you chose to do channel?
Both. So yes, the channel was a buildup of 35 years or something like that, from my mission days. I went on a mission to Dallas, Texas. It's kind of the heart of the Bible Belt in the United States. And so we had to defend the church a lot back then. We got hit hard with anti left and right all the time. So I think it really kind of started on my mission in some ways, but then it built, and I've always kind of had an interest in it, and so I've got tons and tons of bookshelves, 10 bookshelves that are 10 feet high over here. So lots and lots of books. I just love to read and study the gospel, but also these challenges, and so I did have a pretty decent handle, I think, over the years, but to do a video on these topics is pretty frightening because once you put it out there, it's kind of in cement, right? As you probably know now, like you can't change it, right? So you feel like, I really want to get this right, but I'm not necessarily like a deep expert in every single topic, like you kind of want to be to put it out there in cement, right? And you have to think of all the angles. Sometimes I would miss something like, dang it, I maybe should have thought of a different or a little specific aspect of this I missed on. But I viewed it as kind of this imperfect offering. Like this is, I felt like I was supposed to do this, and if I waited to try to make it perfect, I would probably never do it because it would just be too stressful. And so it was just like, okay, let's just do it. And so I would just study the heck out of whatever the topic was, you know, for that week. And I would just go crazy trying to study it in the first half of the week of all the ways I wanted to present it, and then put together some of the material. And then my wife would help to put together PowerPoint presentations and stuff for some of the slides, the visuals and things. Um, so it was just, you know, it was chaos because I work full time. You know, this was just a side thing that I was doing. And so it was a very stressful couple of years. You know, it was, I did tell people sometimes I was kind of thinking, this is maybe 40 plus hours a week that I'm spending on the video preparation and stuff. And so there were some nights, like literally, sometimes I would film before I would go to work, and I would be up until like 4 or 5 in the morning just trying to get it right before I, you know, go on there. So occasionally I might have looked a little groggy on a few of the videos, and that's why. That's what was happening behind the scenes.
Oh, I understand, brother. And you know, you've, as I see, and uh, right behind you, you have also a library of books that you take from, and I've taken some of those recommendations and I've read them myself. And as you mentioned, that research can take a little uh, longer than it seems. And for a regular member, maybe that's not so much time they have, or even for people who are um, researching the church. So some people might say both in favor or against. Why do we need to know about this? For example, members can say, oh, well, why talk about this when we know that the Book of Mormon is true? I don't see it necessary to tackle these topics, and things like that. So, why do you consider that we should look into these topics?
Well, it's a challenging question in certain ways. Um, you can stay kind of at that simple faith aspect, and I think that's okay. I think that's okay. It's um, maybe for some people they feel like, hey, it's going to be too much of a challenge here, but for the lion's share of the people, this is what I've kind of said is it's helpful to go down this route to understand some of these challenges because of the day that we're living in today. It's shoved in our faces, particularly the younger generations. And you maybe don't need this yourself, but you might need it for your brother or your sister or your son or your daughter or your spouse, you know, or your parents. I mean, just this is the challenge today. We're seeing it so much, and there's so much of the attacks going on out there. And we were told this was going to happen. You know, when you talk about the last days, men's hearts will fail them. Even the elect will be subject to deception. This was prophesied, and it's painful to kind of be living in and see what it actually looks like. And so that's why I think it is important to go through it. But I've kind of come to this conclusion that sometimes, you know, it's not like you have to do this. Maybe for some people, they're just fine not going down this route, and they're in a great place, and they're kind of in that simple childlike faith, and it's still very, very powerful. But I think it can be extremely powerful as well to go through the process of dealing with some of these challenges, and still you come out on the other side with who is it? The Hafens talk about this in their book Faith is Not Blind, about kind of this simplicity, complexity, and then simplicity on the other side of that complexity that you went through. Or Jared Halverson talks about it as the fall out of the Garden of Eden, the fall, and then atonement, and that beautiful aspect there too. So these different things there. So anyway, that's it's kind of a nuanced answer because I can see how there's different ways that it may be appropriate for different people. But I do think that who was it? It was Elder Ballard that talked about inoculation. That maybe taking a shot, getting that inoculation of saying, look, instead of getting blindsided maybe with some of this stuff, especially from an anti source, maybe I explore these topics, knowing that there may be some risks there along the way, because this has been challenging for certain people as they do that. But to say, I'm going to study these things from a faithful source, that's what, like my channel and others that have done this, I think it's a great way to learn about the topics, because you're getting it from somebody who is a strong, faithful member, and just saying, look, here's what the issues are. Here's the way critics will make a deal out of this thing, and here's why there's ways that you can look at it that aren't, you can push through this and not be a distraction, because they are distractions from the fundamental aspects of our faith. There, the Book of Mormon is to be the tangible witness of the restoration there. So I always tie it back to those. I don't know if you've ever seen the talk. It was one of my favorite talks ever given. Lawrence Corbridge, called Stand Forever, and he talks about primary questions and secondary questions. Now, the secondary questions in some ways can become endless, and they're not really that important. The primary questions are the ones we really need answered. Does God really exist? Is there really a plan of salvation? These kind of key things. Did the restoration really happen? Is there priesthood authority on the earth? Does it matter? Is it on the earth today? Is there a prophet on the earth? These kind of questions. The secondary questions, what he said was, even if you answer them, they don't necessarily answer the primary questions. But if you answer the primary questions and can get solid on those, you may look at these secondary questions in a very different way, or may be able to work through them in a very different approach there. So it's kind of an interesting, I'm kind of butchering maybe the talk in some ways, but it's an incredible talk. And I don't know where I was going with all of that, but anyway, whatever we were talking about, that's a great talk to look at.
Yeah, that's great. I've heard about it. I've just read a couple of paragraphs, but I'll look into it. It sounds very interesting. And, brother, as you're mentioning this, we have both members and non-members who watch the channel. And also, I bet there are many both members and non-members who have watched yours. And, I really like what you said that ties into something that uh, bothers some people. And it's the fact that with all of these topics and all the nuance behind all of these criticisms, both against and in favor of the church, as some people say, but why don't you teach people about this before they get baptized, right? Why don't missionaries talk about polygamy? Why uh, don't they talk about, I don't know, the priesthood ban or things like that, so they can be more aware of what they're getting into? So you mentioned about the primary and secondary questions. So in this case, do you agree that the reason why missionaries focus on the spiritual experiences and the Book of Mormon is because those primary questions help answer the secondary questions?
Yeah, and it's also what Christ told us to do. He said, "This is my doctrine." And as missionaries, they were instructed to go out and teach really only this. Focus on this, not all the other distractions and things that have always been there in different forms and fashions throughout time. So I think that's also part of that aspect, is following the commission given by Christ to the missionaries in that approach. So I think that's part of it on there. So, but yeah, and the primary questions versus secondary questions could be another way to think of some of that too.
That's interesting, brother. And just to wrap up, I have a couple of questions. The first question is to people who are watching both your channel or my channel or any other channel and are learning about all of these topics and controversies for the first time and don't know what to think about it. Um, what would be your advice for people who are going through that phase in their lives?
Yeah.
And yeah, let's go with that one first.
Yeah. Well, one is to take your time. Be patient. This is the thing that really is so frustrating, because some of these attacks that come out are the long list approach, right? It's just this blast of all this stuff, right? And you can answer every one of them, but it takes a lot of time to really do a good job. It takes time. And one of the things too, I did this video on this aspect of that we become this TikTok generation. Like, we're just quick. We just read headlines now. It's hard for us to research and do deeper study. There's a book called The Shallows, and I talked about it on one of my videos. What is the internet? What the internet is doing to our brains? And it is. It's this thing of scanning, of not really being able to spend as much time focused study on there. So take your time. Know that it's going to take time, and to be patient. Focus on those primary questions along the way. That's why, and study the evidences at the same time. This is something that is my biggest recommendation for people is, please don't just study the criticisms. Focus on, say to yourself, okay, what was to be, there's all these things that cloud things, but what was given by God as the witness of the restoration? It's a tangible thing I can hold in my hand, and it's the Book of Mormon. And you can even say, okay, anachronisms, we can talk about that. But I'm saying the text itself. How on earth did we get this from a farm boy with a third grade equivalent education in 65 days with no notes through dictation there? It boggles the mind. And all the complexity that is in that book. And then you say, as you read it, there's a power that you feel too. As you read through this, you're like, this is incredible, these words. I love, literally on a daily basis, I kind of have those stats in my head. I think about it. And I love getting a renewed witness daily of the restoration because of the Book of Mormon. I feel it in my mind because of that craziness, of that tangible aspect. And then in my heart, as I just feel it, as I'm reading the words, like, this is powerful. This is incredible. And so the two combined, that's the tangible, witness of the restoration. So do that at the same time. Another thing I tell people is keep your covenants while you're doing this. Sometimes what people will do, and I'm not saying, I'm definitely not saying that you want to sin, or that sin is a part of this thing. But sometimes what I've seen happen is people will start kind of going down this track, and then they start kind of easing off of some of their covenants, and they lose their capacity to have the Spirit in their life because of that. This is the time you want to go the other way. You want to max out, okay? You want to be as close to the Spirit as possible. And you're saying, okay, I'm doing an experiment here. I'm going to study these criticisms. I'm having challenges with my faith on this, but I'm going to study the evidences at the same time. I'm going to keep my covenants, and I'm going to plant a seed. And I'm going to see, like Allen 32, is this going to bear fruit? How do I feel as I'm doing all of this through that? So I just think it's so important. And then I would just also add, maybe to join, there's a group online that I absolutely treasure. I love. It's called Uplift Community of Faith on Facebook. They have about 4,000 members, I think. And it's a group that you can go to that is faithful people that have gone through, many of them have gone through their own challenges, have come out on the other side, and are strong in the church. And it's a place, kind of a sounding board where you're having challenges, and sometimes you just need an ear to listen to. So it's a faithful group that you can ask questions in and get lots of responses immediately. So it's a great resource, again, there to do. And then fast, pray, all of those types of things. We're told if we want to talk to God, we pray. If we want to hear Him, we read the words in the scriptures. He'll often talk to us through those words there, and things can come to our mind. They're scriptures. So those are some of my biggest kind of key things that I would say for people.
And just to wrap up, just so you can give our listeners and viewers a sneak peek on your channel, could you tell us Maybe what was your favorite defense against the critics video that you made and your favorite evidences video?
Oh, oh goodness. Hmm. Shoot. Well, the evidences video, there is no question. It's a 100 times over anything else. It's called Book of Mormon. Match it. And so this, you kind of heard me start to go down this route, but I keep going. Lots of things there because this is the thing. Nobody can really answer how the Book of Mormon came to be. And so, and then I would kind of combine that with the witnesses. All of these witnesses that we have there. And I did love this one video I did called "How Could They Have All Lied?" And you think about all of these. One thing I often will do is I will pause in a video and I'll kind of point out on purpose that this person left the church or apostatized or whatever, but they never denied having this experience. You think of Sidney Rigdon, experienced the vision of the 3 degrees of glory. And this was in the upper room of the John Johnson farm. And there's like a dozen witnesses seeing them both having this experience for like over an hour. It's absolutely incredible. And so Sidney Rigdon, later apostatized. He doesn't deny any of this. Oliver Cowdery has the experience with writing the Book of Mormon, the scribe, right? And then having the priesthood restoration and D&C 110, where all the keys are restored. Moses, Elijah, Elias, all of this, the Savior himself, this incredible, these things. And there was a period of time where Oliver was out of the church. He came back the last 18 months of his life, but that was when he could have gotten revenge dramatically. I think Martin Harris said one time he could have been a really rich man, if he had just gone against things when he was out of the church. So it's incredible. One of my favorites was David Whitmer because he never came back. One of the 3 witnesses. It's an amazing testimony that he gave on his deathbed. Still on this. So that kind of went off on that side. On the defense side, I don't know. That's pretty hard to answer. There's so many. I guess I really, really liked the video of becoming like God and the criticisms of that. There, probably because that hits close to home on my mission. There was a video called "The God Makers" during my mission. And anyway, today it's majestic thinking of that this topic and the way to address it. It probably was maybe one of my favorite ones to do, but they were all they all had their own little aspects, and each time I did one, I'm like, wow, this is kind of fascinating, getting really deep in the weeds on all the little aspects that you could do. It's never challenged my faith, but it was really I felt like a faith promoting experience to go deep in the weeds and see the arguments that can be made on the other side of these things, each one of the topics. So yeah, I wasn't ready for that question there, Gustavo. but that's, I will just glance at my my videos here and see if there's any other on the oh, it's too hard because if I started to talk about any of them, each one, yeah, I think that's probably the becoming like God was really that was kind of and maybe the temples of masonry one was really good too. Jeffrey Bradshaw just put out a book. It's like this thick. It's incredible on this topic. And what he did is he showed all of the items that are in masonry that are also in the temple, but that are also in ancient or early Christianity, or before that even, earlier biblical Old Testament texts, if you will, and other ancient writings. And there's nothing that's actually in the temple that would tie to masonry that doesn't tie to an earlier period. and he shows it just in an incredible way. I would have used that in that video if it just came out a few months ago.
Perfect, Brother Andy. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for taking the time to have this interview. And I'll leave a link to your channel and to your website in the description, in case someone is curious and they can watch the videos or contact you.
Wonderful. Well, I'm thankful that you're doing what you're doing, particularly being in the Spanish language directly. Wonderful. There's not a lot out there, so it's great.
Thank you for sharing this with us. Y también gracias a todos por haber visto este video de Viajes de Fe. Al final, al tener a los invitados a tratar estos temas a favor o en contra, tiene como único propósito que el viaje de fe de cada uno de nosotros sea más informado. Así que si les gustó, denle me gusta, compártanlo, suscríbanse al canal y nos veremos en el siguiente video.